This is Katie Scoggins. Welcome to this episode of A Daily Pause. Today I am joined with Alice O'Connell. She is the founder of Learn to Knit and has been teaching knitting in Amsterdam since 2005. We are here to talk about the overlap between mindfulness and knitting and anything and all things in between. Alice, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so
Oh,
excited to
thank
have
you so
you.
much. Thank you for having me. It's a real treat. So thank you so
Great.
much.
Do you want to give everyone a little intro about yourself, how you got
Yeah,
into
sure.
knitting?
So I got into knitting 20 something years ago. I was working as a TV and theatre actress in the UK. I was in need of something to pass the time before I would be called on set that would keep me calm and focused and grounded. And a crew member suggested I learn how to knit. Which I was in my 20s, so this isn't like I learned at my grandmother's knee kind of story. And I was just instantly hooked. I just absolutely loved it. And it just literally cracked open this whole other creative world for me. Um, and I very quickly was asked by friends to start teaching them because my journey was I became a self-taught knitter, and this is kind of not to date myself, but this is kind of pre what YouTube is now, so it was a real kind of borrowing a book here and yeah, I don't know, all sorts of things. It was very scrappy. But so friends asked if I could teach them, and it quickly became friends of friends. And eventually, my husband came home from work one day, and our living room was full of people. And he took me to one side and he said, "You don't know any of these people." It's time to make this a bit more formal. And I was like, "Oh yeah, you're right."
You mean my best friends right here?
Yeah, exactly. I've known them for 20 minutes. We're so close. So yeah, and then I started being this was all in between acting. I was invited to teach at a very famous knitting store that is sadly no longer there in London. I was going to people's houses, teaching them privately. I started knitting for designers. It just sort of organically grew, and cut to, as I say, 20 plus years later, I left acting. I moved from London to Amsterdam, and around COVID, I moved my classes online because obviously we weren't able to meet in person. And I'm very, very aware of how beneficial knitting is particularly through high anxiety periods. And so I was offering classes for free. And again, my husband, there's like a running thread here, but my husband was like, he kept hearing me, teaching, and he was like, we need to record these because you've got all these silly stories you tell people to help people remember things. And anyway, so that's where we did. And then Learn to Knit was born, which is now my platform where you can come, and they come from all over the world, which is amazing, to learn to knit. You can choose my pre-recorded courses, classes, knit along tutorials, or you can book me online for classes or for help with particular patterns that you're working on. And of course I teach in person here in Amsterdam. And that's me.
I love that story. I have this visualization of you like backstage with your acting job and just like zoning in on this tiny thing in your hands. And that's what mindfulness is, right? You have chaos around you and learning
Absolutely.
to like find that center, find your own groundedness.
I think
Um,
it was the first thing in my life that actually
mm,
really taught me how to do that, because I was always an overthinker, always hyper vigilant, and so sort of several steps ahead. And knitting forces you in a beautiful way to just focus on one stitch at a time, one row at a time. You can't think bigger than that. It's a great life skill that it's helped me refine.
I really like how I mean, I haven't seen your classes, but listening to you talk about that, it sounds like you focus on like the mental health advocacy of it, the mindfulness of it, the self compassion. Like you were talking about advocating for patience and permission to go slow or letting go of perfectionism. Those are all things that are so nice to do when you're tuning into yourself, like coming into
Absolutely.
a little quiet moment with yourself.
Yeah, over the years, it started, as I say, like, teaching friends who'd seen me knitting nonstop. But over the years, as my teaching practice has evolved, I really am of the belief that the knitting is actually the vehicle, and actually what I don't want to say teaching people, but I'm creating a space and guiding people through their discomfort, through their imposter syndrome, through their perfectionist mindset, to instead um, sort of discover some patience for themselves, some grace, discover their creativity, all the self-esteem that comes with that, and also to just pause and just take a breath and
Mm-hmm.
enjoy something tangible. It's literally like a physical pause button in your hands. I think that that's become increasingly important the more digital our world has got,
Mm-hmm.
and noisy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a tricky time. So yeah.
I um I vaguely remember you mentioning something that came up in 2024 that got you even deeper into knitting. I don't know if you want to talk about that story,
Yeah.
or like, were you already teaching at that time and you used your own teachings for yourself? You became the student of your
Yeah,
own
no,
words, or how was that?
yeah, no, I'd been teaching. So I've been teaching since, yeah, about 2005. It really wasn't long after me, learning to knit myself. Um, so over the years before 2024, I had already started realizing that knitting was a very therapeutic practice for myself. The different sort of challenges in life, um, particularly like when I became a parent for the first time and I'm in a new country and, I've left a career that was sort of so rooted in my identity. My knitting continued to be a place for me to reconnect with myself, to regulate myself. So I'd already kind of learned over time that this was a therapeutic practice for myself. Then cut to 2024, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And to anyone listening, I have to take a moment to advocate for please do self exams, because it was a lump I found myself.
Mm,
And of course, if you find anything, please go make an appointment, because that definitely put me in a significantly better position than it could have been. And then, yeah, I went through, so having that diagnosis and then going through treatment, which was initially they thought they could just do sort of handle it with one surgery, but it turned out that the margins weren't very clear, so I ended up having another surgery and 16 rounds of chemotherapy. And I am now all clear.
yay,
And I have
congratulations.
thank you very much. And I always come back to the fact they told me that I have a low chance of recurrence. But however, through that entire experience, um, there's obviously a hell of a lot of anxiety.
Hmm.
Your life gets completely taken over by treatments and appointments and symptoms and supporting medications and hair loss and all sorts of things that you become a cancer patient. You really lose a lot of your own identity. And the knitting really came into force for me as, again, something that allowed me to regulate myself, like channel my anxiety through. When we do repetitive actions with our hands, it signals to our nervous system that we're safe. it's
Hmm.
it's a scientific reaction that we have. It allows us to regulate our breathing. It allows you some space to process your thoughts and not be overwhelmed by them, and just because of the rhythm of it. Um, and of course, and I knitted a lot, it also really helped me connect to myself in terms of who I was outside of this experience, who I was before and who I was going to be after. Um, I was able to express my love for people who were, stepped up so incredibly to support me and my husband and my daughter. It really became a whole different experience, and I'm so, so grateful that I had it.
I I love listening to you talk about knitting because I think how I've heard about knitting before is like the step by step, like grab this, do this, and take this and do more of this. And how I hear you talking about it is mindful in itself, like how it helped you reflect on your relationships around you during this time. It helped you process while you were going through treatment, how you see your students needing support in not worrying about perfectionism, about being
Yeah.
patient, about being slow. Your whole approach to this, I wonder if you purposely came to it for a mindfulness tool or it just accidentally expanded this world of
I
mindfulness
think
for
it
you.
expanded. I think it really developed like that. I think initially, because I had learned quite early on, I remember going to therapy for the first time in my, oh God, I think I was 30 or, around that point. And I remember that I should have been in therapy a long time prior to that, but I finally got there. And I remember the therapist saying to me, you should always keep your knitting with you because
Mm,
it allows you to create space for yourself.
mhm,
It allows you to, yeah, regulate yourself. And I, at that time, I really was having to learn about boundaries and how to vocalize them, enforce them, and so on. And the knitting was it's a really gentle and yet radical way of creating space for yourself,
mhm.
holding space for yourself. It's a very socially acceptable thing you can do. You can take it
Yeah.
into any social situation that you find tricky for whatever reason. Um, and you're there and you're present. But you're also, yeah, you've also created a bubble for yourself. Um,
Mhm,
so I think I'd sort of separately learnt that it served as a therapeutic practice for myself. And then the more I was teaching people, and knitting's a very intimate thing, you end up having really incredible conversations, and particularly in a group setting with not exclusively women, but majority, that it's mainly women or those who identify that come to my classes. Um, and some of the conversations that come about, whether they're private classes or group classes, you realize that everyone is not everyone, but a lot of people come to knitting seeking something like that, something
mm,
calming, regulating. And as my experience with people and how the knitting could serve them, how that expanded, yeah, that expanded my whole kind of approach. And I'm particularly interested at the moment in recognizing that women generally, I don't notice this with the men I teach, but women generally have such a perfectionist mindset that
mm,
gets in the way of their own joy and their own celebration of, managing or learning something brand new. um so I'm really intrigued at the moment about how to speak to that, how to counteract that. um yeah, I find that kind of fascinating.
yeah, that really is. I mean, gender norms conversation can be in anything. Like, my first thought when you're talking about that is I think a man is probably more likely to be applauded for doing something like knitting. You know, gender norms say knitting is a woman's thing. You're supposed to make the clothes, do the things under
Yeah,
gender norm standards. And a woman could be seen as, oh, yeah, she's just doing that. She's making her kid a sweater as she should. You know, I'm
yeah,
not
no,
saying that's how it should be, but I think
no, no,
that's a
no.
thing people
I
say.
think you're right. I think that there's definitely an aspect of that, and I think a lot of women also have put that pressure on themselves that, I should be able to do this. I should, be a
Mm,
crafty, creative person. The reality is, creativity is it's not an innate skill; it's a muscle. You have to
mhm,
practice it and broaden it, and so on. I also think that society values we as women, we get a lot of value from society for being capable, for being efficient, and yeah, high output is applauded. And this is so different. This is slower, and this,
mhm,
requires a level of discomfort as you first navigate the needles. And I mean, it lasts about half an hour, 40 minutes, that discomfort. Like everyone can knit. And in every class, whether I'm teaching people online or whether they're following my pre-recorded classes or in person, everyone is actually knitting within 30 to 40 minutes. What's just so interesting is that I'll say my group class, I'll go around the table and I'll say to each of them, you're knitting, you're off, you're away. And then they'll say to me, yeah, but look at this stitch, like what's going on there, what's that? And I have to pause them and say, we'll get there, because the messy stage of being a beginner, it never lasts. It's like life. Like when we were learning how to walk, we don't stay in that spot. We learn and we evolve and develop and refine and so on. It's the same with anything. And you have to allow yourself that messy beginner stage, because it's a gift. It's an act of self-compassion. It's and there's so few opportunities these days to get to be a messy beginner.
Yeah, and in such a safe space, and with such a insightful person holding space for that also. I was just about to say something and my mind jumped. Oh, you're the perfectionism I wanted to comment on. I talk about this a lot. I love your kind of like scientific evidence-based approach behind this. That's how I like to approach mindfulness too. I find that it helps more people have access to this when they hear like, this is evidence-based science. As a person who's worked in healthcare for 15 years as a nurse, I like to loop in that community as well. And this idea you're talking about of the perfectionism and the self-judgment in nervous system support work, we talk about how a surprising way you might be activating your nervous system is inner judgment, your inner narrative. Are you talking kindly to yourself? Are you being compassionate to yourself? Are you being patient to yourself? Or are you secretly being mean to yourself? Are you secretly your own bully? Are you secretly your worst inner critic? And having you be a voice over their active, angry inner critic to themselves. Look at my imperfect stitch. Isn't my I don't know, is stitch the right word? This loop that I just made. It's their first 10 stitches they ever did, and they're expecting perfectionism. That's silly. We are not perfect at doing anything first.
But it's so common. It is so common. The last year, I really got a sense of that. Last year, I was teaching at a 2-day festival here in Amsterdam, and it was 3 workshops each day. And there was like an hour in between the first 2 and half hour in between the second and the third of each day. So my point being is that I was teaching quite a high concentration of, and again, it was mainly women, not exclusively, but mainly women who had signed up to these workshops. So over 2 days, I was with groups of, I think there were a group of 8 each time. So a lot of women, to be in this situation, and it was so common. It was predictable. And even though I always start my classes, even on the pre-recorded classes, I ask everybody, we're just going to take a moment to give ourselves a little bit of grace, because this is brand new, and learning anything new as an adult is uncomfortable and difficult and confronting, because we're rarely exposed to, as I say, being a beginner as an adult. And I always make everybody just take a moment to give themselves the permission that we're not making anything beautiful. That's not what the point is in this very first class. And yet, despite that, it's something so regularly that I have to, and I just speak to it. When it shows itself, I do say to them, okay, we'll deal with that. Do you want to take a moment though, just to celebrate the fact that was uncomfortable for you? You breathed through it. You found the way through, and look what you just made something with 2 sticks and some yarn. And they all, and then we're through, and then they're able to recognize that. And but yeah, it's a really interesting, it's a really limiting standard that we are subscribing to as women. And I'm glad I get the opportunity to point it out. And the amount of times that people, what's extraordinary is the amount of times people, after they've done that first row and they're away, they'll say to me, oh my God, there's so many things I've always wanted to try and do. And now I'm going
Mm,
to sign up to that
it's
ceramics class. Now I'm
empowering.
going to,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because as I say, that messy beginner stage, it doesn't last. It's not possible. It's that's just not the way we are. We are learning beings.
Hmm.
So yeah,
It,
enjoy it while you've got no answers and all questions.
I think even having you be in the background of their head. I know when I learn something new, like I take my teacher's voice is hanging out in my head, like, okay, Alice told me to do this while I'm doing my thing. You're giving them a transferable skill of, say they're doing something else new in their ceramics class. No, Alice told me to be patient with myself. Alice says
They
nothing's perfect on the first try.
I do hear that a lot, which is so humbling and such a, I mean, it's an enormous privilege what I get to do. But
Hmm.
um yeah, it's very true. I because a lot of my students, which I love, they stay in touch with me, and they share the things over the years that they've knitted, and it's really wonderful. And they'll come back to me for, if they want to do their first sweater project, and they want to do a what I call a personal project session where we break it down and so on. But also, because I tell such silly stories to help people remember the knitting techniques, I do get a lot of emails of people saying, I just cast this off, and I can hear you telling that story about inviting people for dinner and throwing somebody out of your house and whatever. So yeah, sometimes I do think, oh God, I'm in stuck in people's heads. How awful for them.
Wait, I don't know if this is possible over video and audio, but can you recreate a story that you've told people to help remember knitting?
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
know.
So that story that they're referring to, so in English we would call it casting off. The American English is binding off, and it's where you're finishing your knitting. It's where you've completed your scarf or your cushion cover or whatever, and you want to take the stitches off your needle in a way that they're not all going to run away. So you're sealing the knitting. And
Mhm.
the way to do that, the stupid story I tell people, is that you knit 2 stitches. So all your stitches are on your left hand needle. Your right hand needle knits the first 2 stitches. So you've now got 2 worked stitches on your right hand needle. The left hand needle then picks up the stitch at the back, and it drags it over the one on the front and off the needle entirely, throws it away. The story I tell is, you've made a big bowl of pasta. You've invited 2 people over for dinner. This person sitting at the back of the room has had too much to drink, and they have become offensive and obnoxious. And you need to politely pick them up and escort them past your other guest, out of your house, and into the night. And then you've still got all this pasta, so you need to invite somebody else round. And at that point, you would knit another stitch. And then there's something about that seat in the back of the room that you have to just keep evicting people. And I must say, because I do say this in every class and whatever, that just so everyone knows, I have never evicted someone in real life from my house. That is not how I have dinner
You
parties.
seem to
But
have a lot of
yeah.
personal experience with it.
But what I love about that story is culturally, because I live in a very cosmopolitan city, and obviously London was very cosmopolitan, and I teach people online all over the world. And I love that culturally everyone identifies with the reason you would evict somebody in a very different way, whether they assign a political belief to them if they're generally American, or whether they. I remember having a Japanese student who found that quite distressing, the idea of throwing somebody out of your house. So she said to me, I'm going to think that they're very tired and I'm showing them to bed, which I thought
Oh,
was really sweet. But
that
that is
is
so
sweet.
interesting. Everyone takes a different kind of twist of it. And but yeah, essentially and I'll get lots of people saying, every time I cast off, I think of you throwing people out the house. But it
You just
helps.
live
It
on the
does.
corner of their piece of work.
Yeah, exactly. But it does work. It does work. So
Yeah, I'm gonna remember
yeah.
that forever, and I have never cast off, binded off any knitting
Well, if you ever get
before.
the opportunity to cast off, then I guarantee that story will drop into your head and it will make sense.
I'm going to email you when this moment happens.
Great, good. I look forward to it.
All right. Well, if you had to give, let's see, like a key takeaway of how, if someone's interested in this, they hear the story or they've always been interested in knitting, what first steps to do to get started and the key takeaway that you want them to take home with them.
Sure. Okay. So, I mean, I think one of the first things to say is that you can learn to knit no matter what your budget is. I think that's really important, because I think sometimes people think it's all very expensive with, very nice yarns and, beautiful needles and so on. But actually, you can find knitting needles and good quality yarn in thrift stores, or, in the UK, we would call them charity shops. Also, I find that if you put it out into the universe, if you tell people that you'd like to learn to knit, interestingly, lots of people will be like, oh, I've got all my grandmother's knitting needles, I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you that. So yeah, I would obviously equip yourself with some yarn and some needles. And then I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I do think, whether it's me or somebody else, I think finding the right guide is a really important thing. That could be a friend of yours, that could be somebody in your local yarn store, but somebody who consistently, calmly guide you through the process. And I think I would say to people to, again, like, approach it with some self-grace and some patience and acceptance that the first 30 to 40 minutes is going to feel quite somewhat uncomfortable, somewhat awkward. It's like if you were, learning to use chopsticks for the first time or use a pen for the first time. But the more you do it, the more you will make refinements, you will make tweaks that make the whole process more comfortable for you. Similarly, if I was teaching you to use a knife and fork, for the first time to eat a meal, over the course of that meal, you're going to make these little adjustments to make sure that you're getting fed. And it's the same thing. Just allow yourself the space to do that. Approach it with curiosity and recognize that everyone can knit. This is the big secret. All of us who, people who don't knit think all of us who do knit are kind of got these superpowers. And the truth is that we don't. It's really, it's the same action again and again and again. And enjoy it. Enjoy discovering something new, enjoy the tactileness of what's in your hands. And it doesn't, you don't have to be a making beautiful Aran sweaters straight away. You can just enjoy color combinations, discovering what yarn fibers you like. There's so much to explore, even if you ended up just knitting the same thing again and again. There are so many different ways to approach it and do it. Yeah, I would just say enjoy it.
I love that. Enjoying creative practice just for that, using it as a mindful practice just for that, using it as a tool to talk sweeter to yourself just for that.
Yes, and also to not approach it without it being performative. Like, gift yourself that.
Yes.
That it doesn't have to be, for show, for the gram, all that kind of stuff. Like, gift yourself that it's an act of, as you say, mindfulness, an act of creativity, just for the sake of, you deserve it. You deserve to explore whether this is something that you enjoy and like.
Yeah, I think wrapping up on that note there is, I think people are craving, whether they realize it or not, the freedom to do something not to be productive under capitalism. Like, I can do something just because I want to do something. I can create something and no one can ever see it, or I can show everyone. Like, I can just do because I want to express myself. I want to be doing something that brings me joy.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I'm seeing that more and more in my classes, for sure. I'm seeing people want to be connected to something tactile, something kind of nostalgic, and all the comfort that brings, and yeah, something that is purely for themselves. Yeah.
Well, anyone who is listening, who is watching today, I am certain they have opened their mind to knitting. If it's because they want to make a scarf or a sweater, or if it's to help them calm down, if it's to learn fun stories about kicking your guests out of your house. I really like how broad you take this, how really everyone is welcome. The way you explain it, everyone feels welcome. into your knitting. And so I want to
Yeah,
ask you, I know we
absolutely.
briefly touched this at the beginning of the session, but how do people find you? Let's, where are the places that they are? Where can they
Yeah,
get
sure.
lessons from you? Where can they follow you?
So you could the best place is my website, which is learntonit.nl, the NL standing for the Netherlands, because that's where I'm based. But you can also find me at the same website, learntoknitonline.com. So it literally does what it says. And you can also find me on Instagram at learntoknitonline, where I share things like yarn stores or little tips, mini tutorials, but the website is where you will find the full kind of menu. You'll get to choose how do you learn best, and I'm available for online classes, pre-recorded classes, and I really love it. I love the amount of people I meet as well
Mm.
all over the world. It's a real treat.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing this invitation to everyone to find a little bit more calm, to find moments of mindfulness, to find ways to be kinder to themselves. I love that you are guiding people to use this as a tool for that and to make cool stuff too if they want
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so
to.
much. It's been I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm very passionate
Yeah,
about what I do, so thank you for the opportunity to share that.
I'm so happy to have you. Bye for now.